Good evening. Tonight, Canada has stunned the world by closing the Alaska Highway to all non-essential U.S. traffic, severing Alaska's only land link to the lower 48. Prime Minister Trudeau's government cited urgent environmental concerns and the need to protect Canadian sovereignty, but the abruptness has left thousands stranded and supply chains in chaos. The Alaska Highway, a vital artery for food, goods, and families, is now blocked, turning Alaska into an island overnight. Checkpoints have sprung up at border crossings, with American vehicles turned away and confusion reigning. Ottawa claims this is temporary, but no timeline has been given, and the move is widely seen as a hardball tactic in ongoing trade and environmental disputes. The closure challenges decades of open borders and cooperation, raising questions about sovereignty, security, and the future of U.S.-Canada relations. For Alaskans, the impact is immediate. Media, stranded truck drivers at border, families talking through fence, closed businesses near border truckers stranded, families separated, and businesses facing disaster. The U.S. now faces a logistical and diplomatic crisis, with the world's longest undefended border suddenly a real barrier. Canada insists on negotiations and new agreements, but Washington sees a blockade, not a discussion. As the sun sets, uncertainty reigns, and the once friendly border is now a symbol of division. How did it come to this? What's next for Alaska and the nation? The only certainty, the border is closed and the fallout is just beginning. We begin our coverage of this historic rupture. News of the closure reached Mar-a-Lago, and former President Trump wasted no time responding. On Truth Social, he blasted Trudeau's move as a disgrace and a slap in the face, vowing, "They will pay a very big price for this." Trump's fiery rhetoric quickly set the tone for a Republican backlash, framing the closure as an act of aggression demanding immediate retaliation. He dismissed Canada's environmental concerns, calling it a weak attempt by a smaller nation to bully the U.S. Trump called for 100% tariffs on Canadian goods, promising, "That will get the road open in about 1 hour." His supporters rallied online, demanding action and accusing the current administration of weakness. Trump's intervention has turned the crisis into a political flashpoint, drawing a sharp contrast between his hardline approach and the White House's measured response. The narrative America is being disrespected, and only strength will restore order. For Trump, this is more than a highway. It's a chance to showcase his brand of leadership. The crisis is now a political battleground, with calls for economic warfare growing louder. As pressure mounts, the administration faces a choice: escalate or negotiate. Trump's message is clear: retaliate or risk looking weak. The stakes are rising, and the political divide is deepening. For now, the border remains closed, and the rhetoric only intensifies. The world is watching America's next move. Alaska's isolation makes the Alaska Highway its lifeline, a single land bridge connecting it to the rest of the U.S. For decades, this route has carried everything from groceries to construction materials, keeping Alaska's economy and daily life running. Alternatives like sea and air are costly and limited, making the highway essential for affordable, timely deliveries. Its closure means skyrocketing prices, empty shelves, and disrupted lives for thousands who rely on the road for work, family, and opportunity. The highway is also a strategic military corridor, vital for national security in the Arctic. Its sudden closure disrupts not just commerce, but the entire support system for Alaska's military bases. For Alaskans, the road is more than infrastructure. It's a connection to the nation. Now, that link is broken, and the consequences are immediate and severe. The state faces economic, social, and strategic isolation. The Alaska Highway's importance has never been clearer or more vulnerable. From Ottawa's perspective, closing the highway was a last resort. Canadian officials cite years of damage from heavy U.S. trucks and mounting environmental harm, arguing that American compensation is outdated and insufficient. Recent fuel spills and threats to wildlife have fueled calls for stricter regulations. Trudeau's government proposes a new Green Corridor Treaty, tougher emission standards, cargo limits, and joint oversight. But beneath the surface, this is about leverage. Canada is frustrated by U.S. inaction on trade, water rights, and climate agreements. The closure is a high-stakes gambit to force Washington to the table. Canada is betting the US needs the highway enough to negotiate. It's a risky move, one that could lead to breakthrough or rupture. The era of quiet diplomacy is over. Canada is playing hardball. The closure's human toll is immediate and raw. In border towns like Tok, businesses that depend on highway traffic are deserted. Truckers like Dale Peterson are stranded, their livelihoods and cargo in jeopardy. Families, like Sarah Jenkins and her children, are cut off from loved ones, unable to afford flights and left in limbo. "It feels like we're being held hostage in our own country," she says. Grocery stores warn of looming shortages and soaring prices. Essentials like milk and eggs could soon be out of reach. The business community scrambles for costly airlifts, but options are limited. Alaskans pride themselves on resilience, but the sudden isolation is a psychological blow. Dr. Anna West, a sociologist, notes, "Losing the highway isn't just a logistical crisis, it's an identity crisis." The sense of connection to the rest of the US is shattered. For many, the uncertainty is the hardest part. The closure threatens not just the economy, but the very fabric of Alaskan life. As days pass, frustration and anxiety grow. The state faces a test of endurance and unity. The roadblock is more than physical, it's deeply personal. The closure's shockwaves hit far beyond Alaska. Washington State's logistics industry is paralyzed, with truckers and warehouse workers suddenly out of work. The Pacific Northwest's tourism sector faces mass cancellations, devastating small towns that rely on summer travelers. Alaska's mineral and seafood industries struggle with disrupted supply chains and rising costs. The need to reroute all goods by sea or air strains capacity and drives up prices nationwide. Inflationary pressures mount as shipping costs surge, affecting not just Alaska, but the entire US market. The closure exposes the fragility of interconnected supply chains. A single road's closure has triggered an economic crisis across multiple states and industries. The fallout is immediate, and the long-term impact could be severe. America's reliance on this northern artery is now painfully clear. In Washington, the Biden administration scrambles to respond. The White House urges Canada to reverse the closure, calling it a violation of long-standing agreements. Behind the scenes, diplomats work to de-escalate, emphasizing shared economic pain and security risks. The strategy: apply pressure without open threats, hoping to give Trudeau a way to back down. But Congress is impatient. Republicans demand tariffs. Democrats urge a tougher stance. The crisis exposes a vulnerability in US-Canada relations, long taken for granted. America must now reckon with a neighbor willing to use leverage. The diplomatic freeze could mark a turning point, shifting the relationship from friendly to transactional. The stakes, not just a road, but the future of North America's closest alliance. The world watches as Washington weighs its next move. Experts say Canada's move is calculated, a bid for leverage on trade and environmental issues. Dr. Jeffrey Hayes calls it middle power diplomacy, using Alaska's isolation to force US attention. Logistics consultant Anya Sharma warns, "There's no substitute for the highway. Alternatives are slow, costly, and years away." Alaska faces shortages and price shocks. Retooling supply chains would take billions and a decade. Politically, the White House is squeezed. Diplomacy is preferred, but domestic pressure demands action. Trump's calls for tariffs resonate with many, forcing the administration to act quickly. Experts agree. Only negotiation can resolve this, but both sides must compromise. The likely outcome: a new treaty with US funding and stricter environmental rules. Canada must reopen the highway soon to avoid lasting damage. Every day of closure deepens the crisis and hardens positions. The path to resolution is narrow and fraught. The clock is ticking for both nations. What's next? 3 scenarios emerge. Best case: swift diplomacy. US agrees to renegotiate. Canada reopens the highway, and both claim victory, though trust is shaken. Worst case, a prolonged standoff with tariffs and a trade war, leaving Alaska isolated and economies damaged. Third option, the US invests in a Canada bypass, new roads, ports, or ferries, an expensive long-term fix now on the table. For now, diplomats hold the key. The next days are critical. Alaskans' livelihoods and the US-Canada alliance hang in the balance. This crisis is a wake-up call. Even the closest friendships can fracture. The Alaska Highway is now a flashpoint in a new era of North American relations. The world waits for resolution or escalation. Good night.